They say that in the mountains of Siberia, the wind carries with it the voices of the lost. To most, this is nothing more than folklore, a story whispered around campfires to ward off the biting cold of the wilderness. But for those who have dared to venture into the unforgiving Ural Mountains, the line between myth and reality blurs disturbingly fast. I learned this firsthand when I set out to uncover the truth behind one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century, the Dyatlov Pass Incident. The expedition that led to my current predicament started innocently enough. I had been fascinated by the Dyatlov Pass mystery for as long as I could remember. The story of 9 hikers who disappeared without a trace in 1959, their bodies discovered under mysterious and chilling circumstances, had haunted my dreams since childhood. Theories abounded, ranging from avalanches to alien abductions, but none offered a satisfactory explanation for the bizarre injuries and strange circumstances surrounding their deaths. I was determined to find answers. It was late January when I arrived in Yekaterinburg, a city nestled in the shadow of the Urals. The air was crisp, the streets dusted with a layer of fresh snow. As I prepared for the journey, I couldn't shake the feeling that the city itself seemed to be holding its breath, as if waiting for something or someone to break the silence. That evening, I met my guide, Alexei, a rugged mountaineer with more than a decade of experience navigating the treacherous terrain of the Ural Mountains. "You sure about this?" Alexei asked, his voice gruff, yet tinged with concern as we reviewed our map at a dimly lit cafe. His eyes bore the weight of countless journeys, each more dangerous than the last. I nodded, my resolve unwavering. "We need to know what happened up there, Alexei." He shrugged, taking a sip of his steaming tea. "It's your funeral," he muttered, though a ghost of a smile played on his lips. He understood the allure of the unknown. The following morning, as the sun struggled to pierce through a thick layer of clouds, we set out for the Kholat Syakhl, the so-called Mountain of the Dead, where the infamous pass was located. Our team consisted of 4 individuals: myself, Alexei, a quiet botanist named Irina, who specialized in alpine plants, and Victor, a grizzled photographer eager to capture the eerie beauty of our surroundings. Our journey began with a sense of excitement and purpose. The snow crunched underfoot as we trekked through dense pine forests, the landscape gradually transforming from lush greenery to the stark white desolation that had claimed the lives of the Dyatlov hikers. As the wind howled through the trees, I couldn't help but feel as though unseen eyes were watching our every move. The forest, beautiful yet oppressive, seemed to close in around us, echoing the relentless march of time. As we made camp on the second night, Victor sat by the fire, his camera trained on the flickering flames. "Do you believe the stories?" he asked, breaking the silence that had enveloped us. Irina shrugged, her eyes distant. "There's always some truth in legends. We just need to find it." Alexei remained silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the mountains loomed like ancient sentinels guarding their secrets. A chill ran down my spine, though whether from the cold or a growing sense of unease, I couldn't tell. The third day of our journey took us deeper into the heart of the Urals. The air grew thinner, the temperature dropping as we climbed higher into the realm of ice and rock. As we neared the location where the Dyatlov camp had been found, a strange feeling settled over me, a sense of foreboding that seemed to seep into my bones. The campsite itself was nothing more than a shallow depression in the snow, marked by a few tattered remnants of clothing and a memorial plaque placed there by other curious souls who had come before us. The mountain was silent, save for the whispering wind that seemed to taunt us with secrets it refused to share. "Here it is," Alexei announced, breaking the heavy silence. His voice carried an edge of reverence, as if we stood upon sacred ground. I crouched down, examining the site. The wind howled around us, biting at exposed skin with icy teeth. Despite the layers of clothing, I felt a bone-deep cold that seemed to come from within the very earth itself. Irina joined me, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Hard to believe they found their bodies so far from the tent," she murmured. "What could have driven them into the night?" Victor snapped a few photographs, capturing the scene from every angle. "Panic? Fear? Something out here spooked them enough to run half-dressed into a snowstorm." I nodded, the questions echoing in my mind. Something had indeed terrified those hikers, and we were determined to uncover what. As night fell, the temperature plummeted further, and the world became an alien landscape of shadows and snow. We huddled together in our tent, our only refuge against the relentless cold. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by the cries of the wind and the oppressive darkness pressing in around us. Somewhere in the early hours of the morning, I was awoken by a sound. A low, guttural growl that sent a jolt of fear through me. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to listen. The wind howled, but beneath it, there was something else. Something primal and unnerving. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, glancing at Alexei, who lay beside me. He was already awake, his eyes wide with concern. "It's just the wind," he replied, though his voice betrayed his doubt. But it wasn't just the wind. The growl came again, closer this time, a sound that seemed to resonate deep within the earth. I held my breath, terror gripping me as I realized it was moving, circling our camp like a predator stalking its prey. Irina stirred, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. "What is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. None of us had an answer. Victor, ever the skeptic, scoffed, though his bravado rang hollow. "Probably just a bear," he suggested, though even he didn't seem to believe it. We remained silent, listening as the growl faded into the night, leaving us with the eerie stillness of the mountains. Despite Alexei's reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone, that something ancient and malevolent lurked just beyond the edge of our firelight. Morning brought little relief. The sun struggled to break through the thick blanket of clouds, casting a pale, ghostly light over the desolate landscape. The unease from the previous night lingered, casting a shadow over our camp. "We should keep moving," Alexei suggested, his voice tinged with urgency. "The weather's turning, and we need to make it to the next checkpoint." We packed up our gear, my hands trembling slightly as I rolled up my sleeping bag. I tried to shake off the lingering fear, attributing it to fatigue and the harsh environment. But as we set off, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, something that had woken from its slumber and was now aware of our presence. Our journey continued, the path growing steeper and more treacherous. The snow fell heavily around us, obscuring our vision and turning the world into a swirling blur of white. The wind howled with a fury that seemed almost sentient, as if it sought to drive us back from the secrets we sought. As we pressed on, a sense of dread settled over me, a gnawing feeling that we were trespassing in a place we had no right to be. The mountain was alive with whispers, the voices of the past merging with the wind to form an eerie chorus that chilled me to the bone. It was then that Irina, who had been walking ahead, stopped abruptly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fear. "Look!" she breathed, pointing to a spot in the snow just ahead. I followed her gaze and felt my heart skip a beat. There, partially buried in the snow, was a cluster of footprints. Footprints that seemed to appear out of nowhere and vanish just as mysteriously into the distance. They were not ours. Alexei approached cautiously, examining the tracks with a frown. "They're fresh," he noted, his voice laced with concern. "But how? There's no one else out here." We exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the situation settling over us like a shroud. The footprints were unnervingly similar to those found during the original Dyatlov expedition, leading us to question if we were truly alone in this desolate wilderness. With mounting trepidation, we continued our journey, the mysterious footprints etched in our minds like a warning. As the day wore on, the weather took a turn for the worse. The wind whipped at us with a ferocity that threatened to tear us from the mountainside, and the snow fell in blinding sheets, reducing visibility to mere feet. It was in the midst of this chaos that we stumbled upon something that stopped us in our tracks. A cave, its entrance partially obscured by snow and ice. The opening gaped like a maw, dark and foreboding, promising both shelter from the storm and a plunge into the unknown. "We need to take cover," Alexei shouted over the roar of the wind, gesturing toward the cave. His voice was filled with urgency, and I could see the strain etched on his features. Reluctantly, we agreed, making our way toward the cave with cautious steps. The inside was dark and cold, the air heavy with an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow the sound of the storm raging outside. Our flashlights cut through the gloom, casting long shadows that danced along the walls like specters. As we settled in, The sense of foreboding deepened, a palpable tension hanging in the air. The cave felt alive, the stone walls echoing with whispers that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the mountain. I could feel it, a presence, watching, waiting. Victor set up his camera, determined to document our findings, but his usual enthusiasm was muted, replaced by a sense of unease that mirrored my own. Irina huddled close, her eyes scanning the darkness with apprehension. "We should rest," Alexei suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. "The storm will pass, and we can continue at first light." We nodded in agreement, though sleep seemed a distant prospect in this eerie place. As the minutes stretched into hours, the whispers grew louder, a symphony of the damned echoing through the cavern. It was in that restless half-sleep that I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, approaching from the depths of the cave. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging through me as I sat up, the darkness pressing in around us like a living thing. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible above the thundering of my own heartbeat. Irina stirred, fear etched on her face. "What is it?" Before I could respond, the footsteps came again, closer this time, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. The sound was primal, predatory, and it echoed through the cave with a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very stone. We scrambled to our feet, flashlights darting across the cavern in search of the source. The darkness seemed to close in, swallowing the beams of light with a suffocating embrace. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a chilling silence that was somehow worse. Victor, ever the skeptic, tried to maintain his composure, though his voice wavered. "Probably just the wind," he suggested, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. I shook my head, the feeling of being watched intensifying with every passing second. Something was here with us, something that defied explanation, and it was drawing closer. Alexei's face was a mask of grim determination. "We need to move," he said, his voice firm despite the underlying tension. "This place isn't safe." We gathered our gear, a sense of urgency propelling us into action. As we made our way toward the cave's entrance, the whispers followed us, a haunting melody that seemed to beckon us deeper into the mountain's embrace. But we could not stay. The air was thick with an unseen presence, a malevolence that threatened to consume us whole. As we emerged into the storm, the howling wind felt like a reprieve, the cold a welcome contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the cave. We pressed on, the storm raging around us as we battled against the elements and our own mounting fear. The footprints we had discovered earlier loomed large in our minds, a constant reminder of the unknown force that stalked us. It was as if the mountain itself was alive, a sentient entity that sought to protect its secrets at any cost. We were intruders, trespassers in a world that defied human understanding, and it would not let us leave without a fight. As darkness fell once more, we found ourselves at the edge of a forest, the trees standing like silent sentinels against the encroaching night. The storm had eased, but the air was still heavy with an oppressive sense of dread. "We need to make camp," Alexei said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "We'll regroup and plan our next move at dawn." We set up our tent in silence, the events of the day weighing heavily on our minds. Sleep was elusive, the memories of the cave and the mysterious footprints haunting our every thought. As I lay there, listening to the sounds of the forest and the breathing of my companions, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faintest hint of a growl, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. We were not alone. And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, bringing with it a new day filled with uncertainty and fear, I realized that whatever haunted the Dyatlov Pass was far from finished with us.